Well, good to see everybody.
And then you're next.
My name is John Cockman, and glad to be here with all of y'all. I'm a big fan of Orville Hicks over there, so I always glad to get a chance to see him and hear him. And we got lots of deep roots in this area as well. My sixth great grandfather was Adam the Explorer. Came down from Pennsylvania with the group and settled in Sherrill's Ford. And his daughter was Kate Sherrill that married John Sevier over in Tennessee. And then my wife's fifth great grandmother was scalped by Cherokee. Her name is Lydia Birchfield. And so we go way back. So anyways, I thought I'd tell a story. It's not long, but it has a good moral to it. And it's about Jack and the golden screw. So gather around here, children, because it has a good message for you. So a long time ago, there's a mountain not too far from here that folks used to call Looking Glass Mountain. And of the folks that lived down there at the bottom of the mountain, there was an old man and an old woman who didn't have any children. And they'd always wanted a child, and finally, they found out they was going to have a baby. So the time came, and the baby was born, and he was a pretty little boy, blonde hair and rosy cheeks, and they named him Jack. But as soon as they got him cleaned up, they noticed there was something a little bit different about him, and the doctor said, "I don't know how to break this to you folks, but your son has a big golden screw in his belly button." Well, his mom and dad were shocked, I can tell you, and they asked the doctors to do something about it, and they sent specialists all the way from Greensboro to look at him. And you know what? None of them could do nothing about the golden screw. And they did have it tested. It was 24 karat gold. And the mom and dad, when they took him home, all the folks from around 4 counties would come to look at this young boy with the golden screw in his belly button. And so eventually they began charging money for it. And people would pay their money and go in and look at the golden screw. And before too long, mom and dad had enough money to build another house. And so everything seemed to be going well. But you see, Jack, when he began to get of age a little bit, he was a quiet boy and very backwards in his ways. And he decided he didn't want people to know about the golden screw. In fact, he didn't like it at all. And so about the time he went to school, he began to cover it up, and he told his mom and dad, "Don't mention anything about this. I don't want my friends to know about the golden screw in my belly button." So they said, "Okay, Jack, we won't say anything about it." But you know what? As he grew up, he never really got to take part in all the events with the other children. Not to say it wasn't sometimes a good thing. There was a bully in school that came to take his lunch one day, hit him right in the stomach, and when his fist collided with that golden screw, he let out a howl and took off running the other direction. But for the most part, it was a real negative for our Jack. And whenever other boys went swimming, he wouldn't take his shirt off because he didn't want anybody to see the golden screw. And so he'd just sit up on the bank and be real quiet. And folks kind of made fun of him a little bit. And when it came time to talking to girls, he never talked to any girls. He thought how embarrassed he'd be if some girl would have found out about the golden screw in his belly button. So he grew up to be a very quiet and aloof young gentleman, and kind of lived down there on the outskirts of town under Looking Glass Mountain. Well, one of these days he was walking down the road and he was pondering the screw, and it was really all he thought about some days. And he fell down on his knees and said, "Why am I like this? Why can't I just get rid of this screw?" Well, he looked around and nobody had seen him, so he took off walking again. But about that time, an old woman came down the road and she stopped him and said, "Jack?" And he said, "Yes, grandmother." He said, men at that time used to say, called old women grandmother. I don't know why. And she said, "Do you want to get rid of it?" He said, "I don't know what you're talking about, ma'am." Looking this way and that. She said, "You know what I'm talking about." He said, "No, I don't. I have no idea." She said, "You want to get rid of it, don't you?" Well, he looked around and said, "All right, I'm listening. I'm listening." She said, "Here's how you do it, Jack." She said, "God heard your plea. And now here's how it's going to get done. On the first full moon after the autumn equinox, you are to climb up to the top of yonder Looking Glass Mountain. And there on the top of the mountain will be a large boulder. And this boulder will look like a table. And you will disrobe and lay on the back, looking up at the sky on that boulder at the stroke of midnight. And then you will discover how to get rid of your burden. Well, Jack said, "You're crazy, old woman," and he went on back home. But you know, as time went on, spring turned into summer, summer turned into fall, and sure enough, Jack looked up and that first full moon right after the equinox was coming up. And he thought to himself, "Don't listen to that old woman, she don't know what she's talking about." But that morning, on the night of the full moon, he sat there standing in his mirror looking at that 24-karat gold screw in his belly button, and he told himself, "I'm not going to do it." But as night fell and he laid down in his bed and his hands crossed across the top of that slot of that great big golden screw, he said, "I'm going to do it." So he got up and he hiked all the way to the top of Looking Glass Mountain. And you know, as he went up through the rhododendron thickets and the briars, pushing his way through up there, he thought of himself, "This is crazy. This ain't going to work." Well, he finally got to the top, and sure enough, just like the old woman had told him, there's a clearing up there, and in the middle of the clearing was a big boulder. It looked like a table. Well, Jack looked around, he didn't see anybody, and it was cloudy. He couldn't even see the moon. He was about to go back down the hill when he thought, "No, I'm here. I'm going to do it." And so he took off his shirt, his pants, and got totally disrobed. Took off his coveralls and his long johns, put his socks in his boots, and then he climbed up the rock looking around. Nobody was around. Lay down on the rock looking up at the sky. Well, down below, suddenly he heard the sound of the bell in the town. Bong, bong. 12 chimes for midnight. And he thought about what the old woman had told him. And he held his breath, and nothing happened. And he thought, "I knew this was crazy." And he was about to get up when all of a sudden the clouds rolled back. And the moon came out. It's full in the sky right above Jack. And as he looked up, he thought he saw something. Sure enough, coming right down out of the sky was a great, big, giant, slowly rotating golden screwdriver. And it lowered and lowered and lowered. And that golden flathead coming right down. And Jack was paralyzed with fear. He couldn't move. And that big blade of the screwdriver lock clicked right into place, right in the center of the slot of that golden screw. And with a creak, it began to turn. And Jack looked down and it began to turn some more. And he began to see threads near the top of the screw. And he couldn't believe it. And went, and it turned and the screw went up and up and up. And it was about as thick as he was. And with that, the screwdriver began going back up into the sky, taking the screw with it. Well, he looked down and he was overjoyed. He'd finally got rid of the golden screw. He said, "I'm free!" And the sound echoed across Looking Glass Mountain, and he jumped off the table and said, "I'm free!" But then, suddenly, to Jack's horrible surprise, his butt fell off. Now, folks, this may seem to have ended badly, but I'm going to tell you there's a moral to the story. You see, from then on, all around Looking Glass Mountain, whenever any of the little children complained to their mom and dad about the way they were, or maybe they'd like to have some different gifts or be the same as the other children, their mamas would always tell them the story of old No-Bottom Jack and the golden screw. And then they'd say, "Son, God made all kinds of people in this world, big ones, little ones, fat ones, skinny ones, tall ones, short ones, ugly ones, and pretty ones. And we may not know exactly why you are the way you are, but we do know this with 100% certainty: it's for a really good reason." And that's the story of old No-Bottom Jack and the golden screw. Thank you.
Good job, John.